UFC San Diego DraftKings has released the salary so we can take our first look. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. A lot of things going on personally that kept me from being able to get you the video, so I apologize for that. But we are coming off of a really good week at UFC Vegas 59, and what are you talking about? Oscar, what do you mean they don't care that I have stuff going on? They just want the video out on time. Yes, they do care. And to be honest with you, brother, you got way too much confidence in your job security to be talking to me like that. Get out. Get out. Yeah. Come back later in the week when you have a better attitude. But we're coming off a good event with UFC Vegas 59. One of you guys actually took down the big contest with Muhammad Usman and Jeff Neal being your underdogs last week. Jeff Neal really came through for the gang last week, and if one of these different channels, if one of these bigger channels told you to play Vicente Luque, just know that they don't know what they're looking at. But we're hoping to carry that momentum into this week, have another strong performance. There are a few spots that I think are really sneaky on this card that I like, but we'll start at the top of the slate, work our way down as always. At the top of the slate, we have $9,300 Gabriel Benitez. He's fighting Charlie Ontiveros this week, and this is a hard fight to call because it's difficult to trust either side. Up here at 9,300, Mowgli Benitez is a massive favorite, and a lot of that just has to do with how bad Charlie Ontiveros' chin is. He has maybe one of the worst chins we've ever seen in the UFC. Charlie Ontiveros has 8 career losses, all knockouts, but our favorite here has a lot of knockout losses as well. Gabriel Benitez has lost 11 times, and he's been finished more often than not in those losses, and he's coming off of a knockout loss, actually 2 straight knockout losses to David Onama and Billy Q. But if we look back at that last fight against David Onama, he was having a lot of success. He was landing really big shots. He was looking dangerous on the feet. He ended up getting caught with a big shot that hurt him. David Onama ended up putting it on him, and he was finished, but there's not a whole lot of shame in that. If he comes out in this fight the same way that he did in that fight, I think he can have a lot of success, and I think he could find a first round finish in this spot. I do worry though about the length of Ontiveros giving him issues. He's going to have a 6-inch height advantage and a 5-inch reach advantage. He can crack, and he does have decent technique. So the knockout upside is there for Ontiveros, and understand this, you will need one side of this matchup if you want to win your tournaments. If you want to play in cash games and you want to avoid this, fine, that makes sense. But I'm telling you right now, if you play in tournaments, you will need one side of this matchup. Now, Charlie Ontiveros is 6'2", cutting down to 155 for only the second time in his career, and that can't be good for a guy whose chin is already pretty suspect. And I like Gabriel Benitez moving up in weight here from featherweight. He did miss weight last time out, and I think 155 pounds is more suited to what his true fighting weight should be. So give me Mowgli this week. He's not too expensive at 9,300 because of that first round upside. He looks like a strong DraftKings play. He might be a must play in terms of showing up in the optimal lineup. Gabriel Benitez is the pick by knockout. Next at 9,200, we have Loopy Godinez. She's going to be fighting Angela Hill this week. Loopy should throw Angela Hill all over the place. In my opinion, Loopy Godinez is a stone-cold lock. Throw her in your parlays to beef up the odds, and throw her in your DraftKings lineups because she's probably going to get a takedown in every round. She has 3-round cardio. Angela Hill has no power in her hands, so it's going to be hard for her to get any kind of respect from Loopy on the feet, and Angela Hill has given up takedowns in almost every single one of her fights. We saw Loopy Godinez look career best in her last fight against Ariane Carnelozzi, where she was taking her down at will, landing serious ground and pound, and even went for a takedown with 2 seconds left in the 3rd round of a fight that she was dominating. We love that. So I like that kind of tenacity and aggression to serve her well this week. And again, she looked her absolute best last time out, and you would expect that from somebody who's 28 years old, developing still in the UFC. On the other side, you have Angela Hill, who's rocking a 13-12 record at nearly 38 years old, with her career best win coming over Marina Moroz. So I have no confidence in Hill this week, and a ton of confidence in Loopy Godinez. I don't think that she finishes this fight because Angela Hill is historically tough. She's never been knocked out. She has been submitted a few times, but I don't know if that's necessarily on the table either. But I do see a lot of wrestling, a lot of control time, significant strikes, and a DraftKings score of over 95 points for Loopy, sitting at 9,200, and definitely not at sky-high ownership this week. So the pick for me in this fight is Loopy Godinez by decision. But next at 9,000, we have Bruno Silva. He's going to be fighting Gerald Meerschaert this week. Bruno Silva is a true knockout artist of the highest order. And GM3, well, let's just say he's not the best striker we've ever seen. But let's be real here. This is a striker versus grappler matchup. If this fight is on the feet, Bruno Silva knocks him out in the first or second round, and if this fight hits the mat, I don't see a way that Gerald Meerschaert doesn't find a submission. In these striker versus grappler matchups, we normally lean grappler because grappling is the most DraftKings scoring friendly style out there. But it's hard to want to do that because one, I'm not that high on Gerald Meerschaert, but two, if you looked at him in his last fight, he just seemed unathletic. He was fighting Krzysztof Jotko and made Jotko look amazing because GM3 looked sluggish, he looked tired, and he really looked like he had no business being in there. He got dominated. Even when they were grappling and we looked like we were in GM3's world, he looked out of place. So I expect Bruno Silva, being the much better striker, to do a lot of damage in this fight, avoid the clinch at all costs, and find an early knockout. Even if the knockout doesn't materialize right away, he still might pick up some knockdowns, and he's probably going to be the fresher fighter later in this matchup. The big favorites look great this week. Bruno Silva is no exception. You do worry a little bit about GM3 finding the clinch, maybe getting a trip takedown against the fence, because that would be bad biscuit.
Bad biscuits, brother.
Bad biscuits make the baker broke, bro.
But I don't really think that happens. I think the most likely outcome here is Bruno Silva, and the pick for me is Silva by knockout. And if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. Really, anything works. Be honest with me. Tell me if I was a little too harsh with Oscar. Now, our next fighter at 8,900 is Martin Buday. He's going to be fighting Lukasz Brzeski this week. I wanted to go with Brzeski in this spot, being the lighter guy, being the guy who's going to be more willing to grapple, being the slightly more athletic and faster guy. I really wanted to take Brzeski this week. But I have a hard time doing that because of the power and the steadiness that's coming from Buday, as well as the way that Brzeski responds to getting hit. It's not a great response. I think Brzeski would have a lot of success against guys that aren't necessarily power punchers. I know it's going to be hard to find that up here at the heavyweight division. He throws punches right down the middle. I think that he's going to be able to land on Brzeski and probably knock him out this week. Now, you worry about his scoring ceiling just because if he doesn't get the knockout, he might not score all that well. In his last fight against Chris Barnett, being the much bigger guy, instead of fighting at range behind his jab, he spent a lot of time in the clinch, and it was frustrating to watch. Ultimately, he ends up putting up a score of about 91 DraftKings points. He was priced at 9,000 that week, so it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the kind of score that you were hoping for. I really don't want to see him pressing Brzeski up against the fence for over 8 minutes this week. I want him to throw hands at distance because I do think that he's going to be an easier guy to get out of there than Chris Barnett is. I still like Martin Buday to get the knockout this week, but proceed with caution. I think a lot of people might get here on DraftKings, but I'm not going to be one of them. I don't think that this is a spot that you absolutely need. Next at 8,800, we have Ode Osbourne. He's going to be fighting Tyson Nam this week. It's an interesting matchup. So Ode Osbourne is now 5 fights into his UFC career. He's sitting at 3-2 in the promotion, and he's finally put some wins together. What I like about Ode is the size for the division at 5'7" with that long 72-inch reach, as well as just being as athletic as he is. But what I really don't like about Osbourne is his gas tank or his wrestling. Ode likes to grapple, but his entries aren't great, like when he fought Manel Kape and looked like he was going to give him a big hug. Ultimately got hit with a flying knee, got knocked out. It was just a lazy entry. Or like when he fought Brian Kelleher. It's not the entry that killed him, but he got bullied in the clinch. Kelleher took him down, controlled him, finished him with a guillotine. Now, his wins in the UFC have come over Jerome Rivera, who might be the WOT. He beat CJ Vergara in CJ Vergara's UFC debut, where Vergara won the 3rd round convincingly, and a lot of people thought that he won that fight. And then he knocked out little Zaruk Adeshev, who's 4-4 in MMA, so I'm really not all that impressed with the wins that he has, at least at this level. On the other side, you have Tyson Nam, who is a vet with more wins than Ode Osbourne has fights. Tyson Nam hits really hard for the division. He's only been finished 3 times in 33 fights, so he's very tough, and the last time that happened was in 2013 against prime Magic Marlon Moraes. Tyson Nam has good takedown defense. He doesn't have great output, which might put him behind in this fight. That's my biggest worry for him. But again, the advantage in power, it's going to be on the side of Tyson Nam. I just don't like the idea of playing Ode Osbourne at this price. And of course, the knockout upside on the underdog is always going to be attractive. I worry a little bit about the age gap between these two, with Tyson Nam being a 38-year-old flyweight. That's a little bit sus, but I will roll the dice on him this week at plus money. And for draft DraftKings, the knockout upside is there. I don't see Tyson Nam making his way into a whole lot of people's lineups this week. I think he comes in at relatively low ownership, and if he finds the knockout, he definitely shows up on the optimal lineup. And I think that's totally on the table, not only because of his power, but Ode Osbourne fights typically don't go the distance one way or the other. So the pick for me is Tyson Nam. It's going to be by knockout as our first underdog this week. Next at 8,700, we have Yazmin Jauregui. She's going to be fighting Yasmin Lucindo this week. Both of these women are making their UFC debut, and this spot is a little tricky for me as well. On one hand, you have Jauregui, who's got much better striking, more power in her hands, and I think she can cause serious problems for the 20-year-old Lucindo. On the other side, Lucindo is going to be the more willing grappler and the better grappler in this matchup. So we have a striker versus grappler matchup on our hands, and if Jauregui is able to get her striking going, defend these takedowns, she's probably going to cruise to an easy decision win. But in this weight class, it's hard to sleep on the person who's got better takedowns, and it's also looking like an attractive dog spot from a DraftKings perspective given her price. So without seeing these two prove themselves at the highest level, I am going to go with the grappler in this matchup. I do think that that price makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of the public is on Jauregui this week, and I might be totally off in my assessment here, but I do think that the Brazilian is going to get it done. The pick for me in this fight is Yasmin Lucindo. It's going to be by knockout. Next at 8,700, we have Ariane Lipski, the Queen of Violence, or the Queen of Medically Not Being Cleared to Fight. She's fighting Priscila Cash as an underdog this week, and I still like Priscila in this matchup. I know we broke this down last week, so I don't need to go too far in depth with you, but I think that Priscila Cachoeira is going to have some advantages in this spot that you just can't ignore. I think Lipski's going to be the more technical striker, but I think Priscila Cachoeira is going to land with a lot more power. I also think that Priscila Cachoeira is going to fight better later. We saw in her last fight against Ji-Yeon Kim, she was throwing those crazy elbows for the last 3 minutes, and she was landing. She was busting Kim up, and I think that she could bust Lipski up as well, who's got that Muay Thai style, isn't going to move her head all that much, is going to be there in the brawl, in that firefight that favors Cachoeira. And after having that weight cut being medically deemed unfit to fight, I don't love her just 7 days later. So give me Priscila Cachoeira this week. That's 3 straight underdogs for you. I think the most likely outcome here is Priscila Cachoeira by decision, not a spot that you have to get to on DraftKings. Last week when we were talking about playing Cachoeira, it was kind of a marriage of necessity, and that makes sense considering that only 2 underdogs won last week. Now the way that they won, Priscila Cachoeira probably wouldn't have scored more points than they did, but the underdogs were few and far between last week. There are more spots that I like on this card. Next at 8,600, we have David Onama. He's fighting Nate the Train Landwehr this week in a fight that delivers violence guaranteed. The judges, or the 3 blind mice, whatever you want to call them, they're not going to be needed for this one, I assure you of that. You will need one side of this matchup on DraftKings, one way or the other. David Onama is riding a 2-fight win streak after dropping his UFC debut to Mason Jones. No shame in that. Mason Jones is very good. That fight was on short notice. UFC debut for David Onama, and he fought well in that fight. Well, at least he fought hard. David Onama has big power, tremendous size for the division. He's fighting out of a great gym, and there's a lot to like about him this week. On the other side, you have Nate the Train, who's never in a boring fight. He throws heavy hands as well. He showed off in his last fight that he's got a good ground game when he submitted Ludovic Klein, and he thought he lost some street cred because he wasn't throwing hands to get the finish, but I'll tell you right now, Nate, the hood still loves you. And to go a step further, I think that he wins this fight. I really like David Onama. I can see him winning fights in the UFC for years to come, but defensively, he's not as polished as you'd like, at least not yet. Take the fight that we referenced before with Gabriel Benitez. Crazy fight for as long as it lasted, and you'll see Onama got that vicious knockout. And to be fair, at 145 pounds, David Onama can brawl with the best of them, but just like Jeff Neal and Vicente Luque last week, Luque likes to brawl as well, but Jeff Neal has a ton of power. I think we have a similar situation on our hands this week where David Onama might find himself in a brawl, but he's going to be getting hit with some hammers from Nate the Train. And if he wants to take this fight to the mat, I think that Nate Landwehr is underrated grappling. I think that he'll be able to stuff a takedown, maybe grab up a Darce or an Anaconda like he did against Ludovic Klein, and then we have Nate the Train inside the distance, and I think that's probably what happens this week. But since this fight was announced, I'd like Nate Landwehr to get it it done inside the distance. I like the power. I think the grappling is underrated. He has the tools to get it done, and we're riding the train this week. Next at 8,500, we have our main event favorite, Marlon Chito Vera. He's going to be fighting Dominic Cruz. Chito has been on a wild run in his last 11 fights. He's won 9 of them. He lost the decision to Song Yadong in a fight that I thought that he won, and then he lost the decision to Jose Aldo, where he turned Aldo into a grappler because he was getting the better of the striking exchanges.
Oh, you're a wrestler now.
Aldo backpacked him on his way to a pretty boring decision, but outside of that, Marlon Vera has been a monster, finishing almost everybody the UFC has put in front of him. And now he's getting these main event spots where he can really showcase his skills, and Chito was made for 5-round fights. He doesn't get tired, he's as durable as they come at bantamweight, and he's stronger the longer the fight goes on. On the other side, you have Dominic Cruz, who's a legend, widely considered the best to ever fight in this division, and this is a fight that makes a lot of sense for both of these guys right now. I say that because the winner of this fight is firmly in title conversation, or at least in a title eliminator spot. And these guys both have styles that should make for an awesome main event. Now, what I like about Cruz is the footwork, I like the fight IQ, the wrestling that he can fall back on, and he's historically very tough. But he is getting up there in age at 37 years old. He's had a lot of injuries. This is not a great matchup for him by any means. The best way to counter that legendary footwork of his is a great low kick. Henry Cejudo kind of laid the blueprint. He was chopping down on Dominic Cruz's legs, and it served him well. Chito has a great low kick, and he's got long legs, like legs go all the way up Griffin.
Hey, baby, do those legs go all the way up? Why, yes, they do. Ah! Oh my God, you're a monster!
Everything Vera throws has power, including those low kicks, so if he's putting some stank on those kicks, I can see him chopping Cruz down and forcing him into the pocket where he does his best work. His knees, elbows in the clinch, tight boxing combination, that's what Chito brings to the table, and I don't see Cruz giving him a whole lot to worry about in return. Cruz has no power, and if he wins this fight, it's because he's winning minutes, staying out of range, but winning minutes doesn't work against Marlon Vera. Just ask Rob Font. I expect Chito to land heavy, land often, ultimately get Cruz out of there in the 4th or 5th round. Obviously, this is a great fight for you to stack when it comes to cash games, so I'm excited for that. But for your tournaments, straight bets, parlays, give me main event Marlon, give me Marlon Vera inside the distance. Next at 8,400, we have Azamat Murzakanov. He's going to be fighting Devin Clark this week. Murzakanov is coming off a win in his UFC debut against Tafon Chukwi. In that fight, he was getting absolutely worked by Chukwi through the first 2 rounds. He looked slow, his output was terrible, he was making Tafon Chukwi look nice on the feet. And a lot of us had Murzakanov that night, I remember, and things were looking bleak. But he, me, you, we get bailed out by a perfect flying knee that he lands in the 3rd round, ultimately getting the knockout, but the performance, the body language, shot selection, not encouraging. On the other side, we have Devin Clark, who's been in the UFC for a while now. He's fought some of the best guys in the world, and he's coming off a career best performance, albeit over William Knight. That's not saying much. Now, this is a tough fight to call because on one hand, I like the experience and the wrestling and the size of Devin Clark, but I do favor the power of Murzakanov and the poor takedown defense from Clark a little bit more. And it's not often that you see Devin Clark putting wins together in the UFC, so I think that he's due a loss at this point. And I think that Murzakanov, just being the better striker, having better wrestling, he might not have the better gas tank in this matchup, but I don't think that he'll need it. I don't think this fight goes the distance. Devin Clark is pretty hittable. He doesn't move his head all that well. I do like Azamat Murzakanov to put together a better performance in this fight than he did in his last fight against Tafon Chukwi. The pick for me in this fight is Azamat Murzakanov by knockout. Next at 8,300, we have Cynthia Calvillo. She's fighting Nina Nunes this week. This fight was rebooked. I'm going to give you a lot of the same things that I gave you last time because I feel like they still apply. Well, the first thing is, the question is Cynthia Calvillo washed? She was starting her UFC career on X Games mode, on demon time. She was getting fights to the mat, locking up submissions, just winning fights, having a lot of gritty performances. In 2019, she wins a decision against Courtney Casey, who's not all that good. She went 0 for 6 on takedowns that night. She fights Marina Rodriguez, and it's a surprise that she doesn't lose that fight because it's Marina Rodriguez, and that happens to a lot of people. But instead, she actually puts together a 10-8 round, a push for a draw, which is actually really impressive. She dominates Jessica Ai with her wrestling, then she loses 3 straight fights where she can't get her wrestling going. Now, Cynthia Calvillo is not a huge threat on the feet. She's been outstruck before, so if she struggles to secure takedowns, a decent striker like Nina Nunes is going to beat her. Now, Nina Nunes, not great. Not very young. had a baby, 10-7 in her career, but damn it, she's got good takedown defense if she has anything. She has decent output. Obviously, she gets really good reps in with Amanda Nunes. I do think that this is a spot where it makes more sense to go with the underdog. I don't see Cynthia Calvillo scoring a lot of points even if she wins. The pick for me is Nina Nunes. It is by decision. You probably get some pretty decent odds on that. I just think that's the most likely outcome this week. And finally, we have Youseff Zalal coming in at 8,200. I don't know if he was cut from the UFC and then re-signed, but he's back and I'm very, very happy about it. I don't think anybody wants to see Youseff Zalal fight more than I do. You might as well put that green Moroccan star in place of this Nike logo right here. I'm ready for Youseff Zalal fight week. He's fighting UFC newcomer Damon Blackshear this week. I like watching Youseff Zalal fight just because defensively he's incredible. He doesn't get hit all that much. He's got awesome footwork, decent hand speed, and despite his numbers not really jumping off the page, he is in fun fight. What's interesting about him in this spot is he's been a career featherweight. Now he's dropping down to 135 pounds where I think he's going to have a lot more success. He's been going against pretty stiff competition. As you can see, guys like Sean Woodson, Sungwoo Choi, Ilia Topuria, but he's only 25 years old still. So those are great learning experiences for a young fighter like Zalal. He's fighting at a Factory X Muay Thai, so he's getting good reps in, especially with a guy like Brandon Royval who's around his same size. And I believe that's going to serve him very well this week, especially against Damon Blackshear, who's going to be wanting to get this fight to the ground. Most of Blackshear's wins are by submission, and he's not going to be able to offer a whole lot on the feet. But getting him down is going to be a lot easier said than done. I don't see Zalal succumbing to a lot of takedowns in this spot, and I see him getting the better of the striking exchanges on the feet. I think Youseff Zalal by decision is the most likely outcome here. Not a spot that I'm dying to get to on DraftKings, even though it's at this 8,200 price range. But if he does work in some of his grappling, he might be able to post the score around 89 to 95 points like he has in the past, and that would be enough down here at this price. So give me Youseff Zalal. Give me Youseff Zalal by decision. You probably get good odds on that when it comes to that prop, and he's a good piece to add into your cash game. Now I'll go over the plays at 8,000 and below. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment for the algorithm. We're trying to get to 1,500 subscribers. We're about 80 away. I want to get there by fight time. Let's go. If I don't get to 1,500 subscribers, I have to forfeit 20% of my purse. I don't want to do that. Damon Blackshear, I'm not really interested. I don't think that he's going to be able to handle Youseff Zalal this week the way that he has to most of the guys that he's fought in the past. Nina Nunes, I like the output from Nina Nunes. I like that she's stuffing takedowns. For DraftKings, I don't see her scoring a ton of points. I mean, historically, she just doesn't. But I do think that this is a good spot for her, and I do think that she would get a little bit of the rub when it came to the judging this week. Devin Clark, I wanted to go with him earlier in the week, but I do think that Murzakanov just needs to land one big shot, get a big reaction out of Clark, and then find the finish from there. And if Clark starts shooting for takedowns and Murzakanov times one of these flying knees, it's going to be good night Irene. Dominic Cruz at 7,700. You have to respect the legend. He's got 5 rounds to work. Chito Vera gets hit more than a high schooler's vape. Yasmin Lucindo, I think that she is being heavily slept on this week, and she could really put together a slate-breaking performance. All the tools are there. Priscila Cachoeira, this is going to be the second week in a row where I'm telling you to pick Priscila Cachoeira. You already know what time it is. Tyson Nam, I mean, he's super low output, so you really do worry about that, but it doesn't really take much from him. He's got big power, deceptive power for this weight class, and Ode Osbourne is not above getting cracked. Brzeski, I don't think that Brzeski has the goods this week. I think Martin Buday probably knocks him out. Gerald Meerschaert, absolutely not. And Angela Hill, absolutely not. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you've already subscribed, go to your mom's house, have her subscribe on her iPad, do whatever you need to do. We have to hit 1,500 subscribers. I don't want to forfeit my purse.